Welcome to the Perfumed Perspective. There's a hierarchy of the senses. You've probably never thought about it in those terms, but you live inside it every single day. Sight is at the top, then hearing, then touch, maybe. And then, sitting right at the bottom, smell and taste, which is basically smell's poor cousin. This ranking, this idea that some senses are serious and others aren't, is so baked into our culture that it feels like biology, like it's just how things are. But here's the thing, it's not. It's completely made up. The olfactory system has a direct connection to the limbic brain, the emotional memory part that no other sense has. Every other sense has to go through the brain's relay station before it gets processed. Smell doesn't. It arrives first. If anything, it's neurologically primary. The hierarchy that puts it last has zero biological justification. This whole channel is built on that gap. The gap between what smell actually is, neurologically, psychologically, culturally, and how seriously we take it. So before we get into the fragrances, the history, the industry, I want to start here with the hierarchy itself. Where did it come from? Who built it? And what does it cost us that we maintain it? Because I think the answer is surprising and honestly a little bit infuriating. It starts, as so many of our bad inherited ideas do, with Plato. In his writing on the senses, Plato ranked them based on how close they were to reason and how far they were from the body. Sight was at the top because you can perceive things at a distance without physical contact. You look at something without being touched by it. That, for Plato, was very spiritually respectable. Smell, on the other hand, requires proximity. You can't close your nose the way you close your eyes. It's involuntary. It's associated with appetite and decay in the most obviously animal parts of being human. In Plato's framework, that's about as low as you can go. Now, and this matters, Plato wasn't describing biology. He was constructing a value system. He needed smell to be inferior because he needed the body to be inferior. The body was a distraction from reason. The senses that escape the body, sight, hearing, were noble. The ones that are stuck in the body, smell, taste, touch, were not. That's the argument. It's a philosophical move, not a scientific finding. Kant picked it up and ran with it. His argument was that smell can't produce genuine aesthetic experience because it's too subjective, too immediately pleasurable or disgusting, too tied to the body to achieve the kind of detached appreciation that he thought great art required. Hans Jonas, writing in the 1950s, argued that sight was the noblest sense because it perceives things at a distance without consuming things, while smell requires the object to release something of itself into the air. These are sophisticated arguments, but they all prove too much. Sight also requires the object to do something. Reflect light. So the real issue isn't biology. It's that these thinkers had a specific set of values they were trying to protect. Distance, control, mind over body, and smell kept threatening those values. So smell got demoted. The philosophical demotion was bad enough, but in the 19th century something happened that made it much worse and much more explicitly political. The French historian Alain Corbin documented it brilliantly in The Foul and the Fragrant. The 19th century middle class decided to use smell as a class marker. Here's how it worked. Working class bodies smelled. of labour, of poverty, of the conditions people lived and worked in without access to clean water or heating or time for hygiene. The bourgeoisie made odorlessness their standard. To be clean in this new logic was to be odorless. To smell was to be poor, or worse, morally inferior. The absence of smell became the mark of civilization. The presence of smell became evidence of social inferiority. This was not describing biology. It was describing access to infrastructure. But by grounding the class hierarchy in something that felt like a natural bodily fact, the lower orders just smell. That's simply how it is. It made the hierarchy seem inevitable, natural. And that's exactly how power works when it's working well. It hides itself inside what feels obvious. The modern perfume industry was built right in the middle of this structure. Fine fragrance was, from the beginning, a technology of distinction, not just about smelling nice, but also about marking yourself as someone who has transcended the unscented middle and reached the elaborately, expensively scented upper tier. That's still in the DNA of how luxury fragrance is marketed, and understanding it changes how you read every advertisement you've ever seen for a perfume. There's a practical consequence of all this that I find genuinely frustrating. Because smell got demoted from the serious senses, we never built a proper shared vocabulary for it. Think about what we have for music. Melody, harmony, timbre, counterpoint, cadence. For visual art, color theory, composition, perspective, chiaroscuro. Centuries of developed language that lets people talk precisely about what they're experiencing. For smell, we borrow. We say a fragrance is bright or dark. Those are visual words. Warm or cold, tactile. Sharp or smooth, tactile again. We don't reach for metaphor because we don't have the direct descriptive language, not because smell is intrinsically indescribable. Perfumers have a precise technical vocabulary, but it belongs to the industry. It's professional. It's not cultural. And that's exactly what the fragrance community online, Fragrantica, Parfumo, Bass Notes, YouTube, all of it has been quietly doing for 20 years. Building a shared vocabulary, collectively, in public, through millions of reviews and comparisons and arguments. You know, it's imperfect and sometimes chaotic and occasionally very funny, but it's genuinely democratic. People developing the critical language for a sense that the cultural establishment decided didn't deserve one. That's what this channel is part of, and I think it matters more than it looks. The classical fragment for this episode is Houbigard's Fougère Royale, made by Paul Parquet in 1882. I chose this as the opening fragrance of this entire series deliberately, because it proves the point. Parquet introduced coumarin, a synthetic material made in a lab with no direct equivalent in nature, as the central structural element of his composition. Coumarin has a warm, hay-like, slightly sweet quality that smells like nothing specific you could point to in the natural world. It's genuinely its own thing. And that was the argument. Not, here's a reproduction of a natural smell, but here's a smell that has never existed anywhere before. I made it. Chemistry made it. It's new. Think about how radical that was in relation to the philosophical tradition we just discussed. Plato's hierarchy rested on the idea the senses just perceive copies of things. inferior reproductions of the eternal forms. Smell, at the bottom of the pile, perceived the most physical, most fleeting, least significant copies. And then comes along Paul Parquet and makes a smell that is not a copy of anything. It is no original. It's pure creation. The philosophical framework has no place for it, and it's beautiful. Fougère Royale is also the founding text of the Fougère family. Every masculine aromatic fragrance in this tradition, and there are hundreds of them, grows from this 1882 root. Named after fern, by the way, which barely smells at all in nature, the whole family is built on an invented smell, named after a thing that doesn't really have a smell. I love that. It's very on brand for fragrance. I want to hold this bottle up for a moment because the bottle itself is part of the argument. The stark black bottle, white typography, the perfumer's name, Dominic Ropion, printed as prominently as the house name. That was a deliberate decision by Frederick Malle when he founded his house. His founding proposition was that perfumes are artists and deserve to be credited as artists. Name on the label, complete creative freedom, no commercial brief, make the best thing you can. Fougère Royale in 1882 had no named perfumer. Paul Parquet made something extraordinary, and history almost forgot him. Colonel Flower in 2000 put the perfumer's name at the center of every communication. That's 118 years of the same argument developing. Smell is serious enough to credit its creators, and the fragrance itself backs the claim completely. Colonel Flower is tuberose, a notoriously difficult material, the fragrance world's most polarizing floral, something that in the wrong hands becomes overwhelming and in the right hands becomes extraordinary. Ropion had complete freedom. He used it to make the most ambitious tuberose composition I know. Creamy. Almost narcotic, with a sweetness that's never saccharine and a depth that develops across hours of wearing. It's not a crowd pleaser. It's a statement about what tuberose can do when someone takes it completely seriously. There's also a joy connection worth making here. Jean Patou launched Joy in 1930 as a deliberate declaration. The most expensive perfume in the world, made with the most precious natural materials, named after what he intended it to give people. Both Joy and Colonel Flower are making the same founding argument this episode is making, that smell is worth extraordinary investment, extraordinary craft, and extraordinary ambition. The register is different. The conviction is identical. The hierarchy of the senses wasn't inevitable. It was built deliberately by people with specific interests in maintaining it. Plato needed the body to be inferior. The 19th-century bourgeoisie needed the poor to smell bad, and the culture that inherited those assumptions never bothered to build the critical tools that would have let us talk properly about smell. None of this is permanent. Fougère Royale says, chemistry can create smells that never existed before. Colonel Flower says, the perfumer who creates them deserves to be named. Both are arguments for taking smell seriously. That's where this series starts. Next time, a single synthetic molecule that's hiding inside roughly a third of all commercial fragrances. Most people can't identify it. Perfumers describe it like it's almost magic. It's called isoe super. And there's a twist. Thanks for being here. Remember to subscribe.